So why are we seeing more rapid maneuvering in this war in Ukraine on the side of Russia, right? That was the initial thinking that Russia would quickly overwhelm Ukraine, that they would just have better quality of everything, tanks, infantry, weaponry, aircraft, etc. Right? But it hasn't really happened. Well, why is that? What's going on over here? Well, starting with, let's take a few factors into account. One, the size of Ukraine. Here it is on the map. You could see its borders. You can see Ukraine is actually a rather large country. Look, it's bigger than Belarus, bigger than Lithuania. It's actually a little bit almost bigger than Poland here, right? On just the eye test without even having to measure anything out. Bigger than Romania, bigger than a lot of these different countries. Look, bigger than Austria, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, all these different places. There's very few countries that are anywhere near as big as Ukraine. Secondly, Ukraine is large and very flat, wide open spaces, right? There is not a lot of terrain that you can hide behind, a lot of open, grassy land for hundreds of miles. Okay, not a lot of cover and concealment for your vehicles and your air and ground forces. Okay, so there's that. The next piece, why is this such a problem? So here's a map of a lot of the fighting as of the 6th of February. Kind of zooming in. If we can control the map a little bit here. Okay, this is where a lot of the action is. We've been seeing a lot of fighting around Bakhmut, right? This is the thing that gets talked about all the time, which should be right over in this area. Let's zoom in a little bit more. There it is. That's Bakhmut right there. And we lost it. Okay, great. All right. So it's been a slow process. For those who've been paying attention to this, you've been hearing about Bakhmut for months, where there's a lot of fighting here. And slowly, the Russians have been moving here around Bakhmut, taking chunks of it, trying to circle around and envelop it. But this has all been a very slow process. Why are we seeing rapid advances within a few days? Well, first off, what is maneuver warfare? What is the goals of maneuver warfare that make it different from attritional warfare, right? Those are the two major styles of warfare that have been around since warfare began. Maneuver warfare seeks to defeat the enemy by quickly getting around your enemy's strong points, getting after the weak areas like the logistical infrastructure of your enemy, and slowly degrading and causing enough confusion amongst the enemy that they eventually surrender, quit, or are unable to keep fighting. Right? This is a way of beating your enemy without having to really engage in a direct clash with the enemy. There's a lot of different ways to do it, the most obvious of which is to use maneuver units and elements to quickly move around your enemy and just encircle them if you can, or cut them off. Attritional warfare, more classic warfare, is where you attack the enemy directly and you overwhelm them with mass, with weapons, with better equipment, more troops on your side, more of everything on your side, and you grind them down by destroying them piece by piece. You can measure victory in attritional warfare by just body count. How many of the enemy have you killed? How much of the enemy's supplies have you destroyed? Maneuver warfare is more about how many pieces of territory did you take? How many prisoners of war did you capture? Because they simply surrendered to you, realizing that they had no chance of fighting anymore. So those are your broad strokes kind of definitions that look at it differently. Now back to why is this not happening? Well, maneuver warfare requires your forces to be very skilled at combined arms operations. You need very professional troops that have trained extensively together for a long time. You need quality leadership at all levels of the organization. You need to have integration between armored units, infantry units, aircraft, artillery, all well coordinated, and logistical support often gets overlooked, all very well coordinated to allow them to work together rapidly. They have to be able to maneuver on the enemy and continue to follow up without getting bogged down or stopping. It just takes a lot of training, a lot of cooperation and integration at all levels. It is very difficult to do. The Russian army is not really designed for maneuver warfare and never was. It's not their doctrine. It's not the way they do stuff. Their ability to really integrate ground forces at all levels, at all types of arms with air force and air power is weak. It's not good. It is not good at the tactical level. It has not been great at the operational level or higher. It's just not great. So they're never really seeking to do grand scale maneuver warfare. That's something that the Americans would do. That's something that the Germans might do. That's something that some of the other European countries have the ability to do, that have the doctrine in their militaries to try maneuver warfare. You also have to have the resources to do it, and very few countries have the resources to train extensively, combining aircraft, combining your armored forces, combining infantry, combining all that stuff. It takes a lot of training, a lot of logistics, a lot of money and funding to fund the training for all that to make it happen. So very difficult to do. So the Russians here have stuck with more of an attritional style of warfare, slowly, piece by piece, inching forward in different parts of the battlefield, taking up bits of ground, using simpler forms of operations. Okay, basic infiltration tactics, combining infantry with artillery, having infantry and small reconnaissance forces find the Ukrainian positions and then use artillery to blast those positions, and then have the infantry move forward and clear the area. It all takes time. Okay, is it effective? Can you win doing that? Yes, absolutely. But it is a slow process. It is a grind process. It's attrition. They are slowly trying to chew up Ukrainian forces bit by bit. So that's why you see these fights here, like in Bakhmut, that have been taking months at this point. Even though we see Russian movements here wrapping around Bakhmut, and they're doing the same in other areas to the north and other areas in the south, it's been very slow going. The only good example of maneuver that has been really demonstrated throughout this war was the successful Ukrainian offensive that they conducted back in the fall, where they took a large chunk of territory within a few weeks. Basically, they forced the Russians to just withdraw and pull back. That's an example of what maneuver is trying to do. But can the Ukrainians really sustain that? Well, that's a big question. Right now, they're being resupplied with tanks, with other equipment from the West, and they're going to try to do it again at some point if they can. But remember, it's tough to do. You need a lot of highly trained units, soldiers, and leaders that all have the same playbook that they're operating from. They're well coordinated at all levels and at different types of organizations, from the Air Force to armored, to artillery, to infantry. They all have to have great teamwork to understand how to continuously move and never get stuck. Okay, keep moving. You have to have a lot of leaders capable of making independent decisions on the field in order to keep up the pressure on the enemy. It's very, very hard to do. So that's the reason we're not seeing a lot of it here. There's also the fact that technology has made a change, right? We are seeing the usage of drones, the usage of satellites, the usage of other kinds of new tech that hasn't really been used before. There's a lot of anti-armored vehicles weapons out there, shoulder-mounted anti-tank systems that are being used now, the NLAW, the Javelins that are coming out from the West, a lot of this stuff, which is never before seen in warfare. And it's kind of forcing combatants on all sides to figure out, how are we going to maneuver in this new environment, right? There's a learning curve that needs to happen here. So anyway, those are all reasons why we're not really seeing maneuver warfare here. It's just not the Russian style. It never was. It requires way too much training and discipline, which they don't really have, not to that level anyway, to create large scale operations of maneuver. Okay? So hopefully that gets into answering the question, why aren't we seeing maneuver in the Ukraine-Russia war?